It wasn't merely a science fiction film, The Fifth Element. Couture was in disarray. Opera seemed like the future in a movie that plopped a flying taxi into a neon battle zone. Behind the cosmic cacophony and crazy outfits, however, nothing was simple. Decades were needed to complete the script. There was never any interaction between the hero and the villain. And he declined to wear the wig, even though he was originally supposed to portray Ruby Road. The Fifth Element has 20 strange facts. A diva outfit that fit Luc Besson's wife, just as he fell for someone else, was buried in the chaos. Request a multipass. Logically, this ship doesn't slow down. Number 1. A boy living alone in a little French village existed long before flying automobiles and laser fights. Art was not Luc Besson's upbringing. He had no aspirations of becoming a movie star or having movie parents. He was creative and lonely. He began composing what would eventually be The Fifth Element when he was 16. It was not a movie concept at the time. It served as a haven, a universe into which he could disappear. He wrote stories that made sense while everything else around him didn't, such worlds within worlds, Zorgi, Lilu, and the Mondoshones. That teen's escape turned into one of the priciest science fiction movies ever produced, but it took more than 20 years. Beneath all the visual chaos, that lonesome child was still writing his way out. The second is that Luc Besson created a universe rather than merely a film. The Fifth Element was not a screenplay in its initial draft. The epic was almost 400 pages lengthy and covered the entire galaxy. It was not intended to be a single film at the time. It was a trilogy with 3 whole stories, several planets, and dozens of extraterrestrial races with complete histories, languages, and power struggles. Galactic councils, entire civilizations that never made it past the page, and personalities with deep backstories reduced to supporting roles were all part of the political subplots. It was wildly chaotic and far too lengthy. But also exceptionally intelligent. Besson devoted years to creating the planet, layer by layer, mapping entire alien faiths, naming animals, and designing the cities in order to explain a single prop. However, the studios delayed the start of filming. Too strange, too large, and too costly. Then he accomplished the unimaginable. He reduced everything to a single, slimmed-down film that was still vibrant and chaotic but only a small portion of his original vision. The cinematic experience was only a small portion of a much larger realm. The remaining ones? Still confined to notebooks or circling in Besson's brain, awaiting a return journey. Third, despite having a script, Corbin Dallas's future was uncertain because his visage was nearly completely different. Prior to Bruce Willis signing, the studio had Mel Gibson as a backup plan. He had just starred in Braveheart, a successful global film. Besson paused, though. Gibson's energy was inappropriate. It's too grounded and somber. He was looking for someone who could be calm in the face of mayhem and still manage to smile. Nothing was the same once Willis said yes. Corbin Dallas developed into more than just a soldier. With his sarcastic humor, poor luck, and a cab full of fate, he turned into a reluctant hero. It would have been more somber, chile, and less enjoyable with Gibson. It flew, though, with Bruce. Hurry and give me the money. That's a Z-140? It's actually a Charger sock model. Indeed? I'm lucky that it's not loaded. Press that tiny yellow button to make it load. Fourth, Gary Oldman did not try out. The role was not pursued by him. He hardly even perused the screenplay. It was a favor he did. Nil by Mouth, Oldman's passion project, had been created by Luc Besson a few years prior. So Oldman immediately replied yes when Besson called him up for The Fifth Element. He didn't understand it in private, though. He then acknowledged that he didn't know the story's plot. He still arrived wearing a half-helmet made of plastic. They performed one of the most weird, memorable sci-fi performances of the 1990s, channeling cartoon villains and Texas oil barons. Fans adored every moment of him, even if he detested the film. Fifth, the search was extensive. Actresses auditioned in excess of 8,000. Some were rising stars, while some were well-known. A recent graduate of Showgirls, Elizabeth Berkley, was one of them. Her reading was bold. Others arrived practicing extraterrestrial elegance, with heavy accents and sci-fi swagger. However, none of them seemed novel. And then Mila Jovovich entered. She didn't try to dominate the room or talk loudly, but according to Luc Besson, it hit him right away. She appeared to have no place of origin. Not America, not France, nor Earth. She appeared to be from the future. And he knew she was Lelu the moment she spoke. It was because she was pure, not because she was polished. Mila was that emotion. They wanted someone who felt exotic without trying. The woman who felt like a mystery was thus selected out of 8,000 women, whether or not she was famous. The orange straps weren't the only thing she wore. She gave them a legendary status. Since the fifth element didn't require notoriety, presence was necessary. The sixth number. She was in possession of the universe's key on screen. Off-screen, her own world was slowly unraveling. There was more to the extraterrestrial diva who appeared on stage midway through the fifth element than just a voice. She was married to Luc Besson. Mai Wen, a French actress and independent filmmaker, was her name. Besson cast her as the diva Plavolodina, a tall, impressive woman concealed beneath layers of blue makeup and foam, as an enigmatic, otherworldly character whose voice literally unlocks the potential to save the universe. The staff was taken aback by her on TV. That motion, that quiet, that sound. But something else was going on behind the scenes. While directing the movie, Besson began to develop feelings for Mila Jovovich. She was as revolutionary as Lelouch, half my Wednesday's age, and new to the field. Mila and Besson's relationship began modestly. Late-night script notes, hard days on set, and group language instruction. But it developed too quickly. Besson was openly with Mila and had discreetly split from Mai Wen by the end of the shoot. No public scandal, only a change in orbit in private. Backstage, the woman who held the key to rescuing the planet observed her spouse veering toward a different type of fifth element. You feel it in the final cut. A pair of women, both radiant. Both heartbreaking in their own unique ways, and both unforgettable. 7. Lelouch spoke in her own language, not just with her eyes. Luc Besson created the script, a fully developed alien language with more than 400 distinct words, and created the holy language in the process. Together, he and Mila developed it, honed it, rehearsed, experimented, and as their relationship outside of the screen grew, they began to use it for other purposes. Private notes, love letters, and phrases that were only read by those on site. Scribbled on paper and uttered in between scenes, it became their secret code. It was the language that endured, not the romance. And every word Mila says in the movie isn't nonsense. It's well-practiced, fluid, and incredibly intimate. On-screen alien, intimate in real life. Lelu was more than simply a rescuer, number 8. She was a tornado of unadulterated might, a swirl of feet and fists that defied gravity. And a lot of Mila Jovovich's on-screen aggression was her own. Mila was keen to capture every explosive movement of Lelu, even though many performers rely extensively on stunt doubles. She put in endless hours of training, mastering wire work, fast-paced combat, and fight choreography. Because of her commitment, she became a true action hero. Consider the well-known combat scene in the hallway. With amazing agility, Lelu unleashed and defeated several armed guards. It was not computer-generated imagery. And it wasn't a wig-wearing stunt double in that scene. Mila herself was there. Her dedication stretched the bounds of expectations as she twisted her body, delivered accurate kicks, and endured exhausting takes. She did numerous high-energy routines, risking bumps and bruises. Because its ultimate weapon had to bleed, fight, and fall with true human grit if the fifth element was to feel real. It wasn't just sci-fi bullshit, number 9. Actually, Zord's crazy all-in-one super weapon did its job. The flamethrower, at least. The prop crew constructed a realistic model of the gun with functional flame jets. It almost lit the entire set on fire when they tried it. A blast went too high. The ceiling was covered in flames. The crew members hurried. Extinguishers appeared. Although no one was harmed, the message was obvious. This film was not being cautious. There was danger even in the weaponry. It was just the way Besson liked it. 10th. Character design did not make them slow. Because they were dissolving, they moved slowly. In the first scene, the Mondoshawan aliens were dressed in 80-pound costumes made of thick foam with little airflow and no cooling systems. The actors inside were about to sweat, so they walked carefully through the old corridors, not for dramatic effect. Mid-scene, one performer had to be removed out of the costume, rehydrated, and stabilized after collapsing due to heat exhaustion. They narrowly survived the shoot. In reality, what appeared to be graceful alien dance was survival, one stride at a time. A Hobbit. Ruby Road was not subtle at number 11. Screams that could stop time, a sparkling microphone, and a leopard pattern. The clothing, not the performance, was the most absurd aspect, though. It was made to be tight, noisy, and utterly unusable by Jean-Paul Gaultier. It had no flexibility, a stiff spine, and a 50-pound weight. Chris Tucker had trouble breathing, sitting, and leaning forward. He didn't take a seat in a chair in between takes. He stood in corners, leaned against walls, and perspired for full filming days without getting any rest, although you would never know it. Since the loudest voice in the cosmos can occasionally come from someone who can't even sit still, he is chaos personified on film, bouncing, shouting, and stealing scenes with every breath. Number 12, most movies pretend to be it. The fifth ingredient isn't camera techniques, CGI, or fast cuts. The destruction of the Divas concert venue wasn't caused by green screen or small models. There was a full-scale explosion. Conducted in a real building, live. It was, at the time, the biggest interior explosion ever caught on camera. One chance, no retries, a calculated risk. Fire marshals were waiting, barriers were set up to collapse, and there were dozens of cameras. For the scene to be gone forever, everything had to be flawless. When it detonated, it was perfect, chaotic, and dangerous. A visual legend that started as a literal blast. In a film full of crazy concepts, this one really went haywire. Without a leader, the Mongolers will not fight, therefore we must find one. Have someone engage in negotiations. Oh, number 13. Hero, villain, and two icons, and they never, ever cross paths, not even by chance. Zorg, Corbin Dallas, and Bruce Willis all appear in the same plot but never interact with one another. It's due to decision, not scheduling. That was Luc Besson's design. He preferred the hero and evil to battle through reverberation rather than face-to-face conflict. They circle one another on their travels. Get in the way. But do not clash. It is uncommon, dangerous, and oddly successful. The plot manages to function without the conventional showdown, and the tension nevertheless increases. Because the person who never even anticipates your approach can sometimes be your most formidable adversary. 14th. In the shadows, most science fiction exists. Gloomy lighting, metal hallways, and dark ships. None of that was what Luc Besson desired. The future need not be bleak, he argued. It may be lively, raucous, and chaotic. Therefore, he illuminated most action sequences in bright daylight rather than with darkish interiors. A taxi chases in the clear blue sky. Sterilized white corridors with gunfights. Explosions of orange over golden clouds. Every detail, every outfit, and every effect were exposed to full light, which was a huge risk. But that was the idea. Not squinting at the future was not what he wanted you to do. And he violated one of the oldest rules of science fiction in the process. Instead of making it dark, he made it bright. I tell him she's going to leave. The second is from my attorney. He was going to leave. You have been dismissed. Prior to the screaming and the leopard print, Prince was the rightful owner of the Ruby Road part. Before Chris Tucker took over the film in a flurry of glitter and mayhem. Luc Besson has always desired him. Its energy, voice, and unwavering swagger transcending gender boundaries. Prince found it fascinating. He accepted a meeting. He found the script appealing. Sure, he replied. He then noticed the costumes. For Ruby, Jean-Paul Gaultier had created a whole wardrobe. Prince somehow refused to wear the lace, mesh, high-arched heels, plunging necklines, clinging fabrics, and colors that shouted louder than the character. Even for him, he felt, it was too intense, too feminine. He retreated. Then Besson looked at Chris Tucker, whose energy was entirely different. More frenetic, quicker, and younger than sultry. After stealing the part, Tucker took off. By combining Prince's approach with Michael Jackson's motions, he transformed Ruby Road into a fast-paced screaming machine. However, you can still sense what nearly happened in your gut. Tucker was written for royalty, not for Ruby, for that reason. And Prince continues to hold the microphone in some parallel world of the movie industry. 16th. Besson was meant to have created a masterpiece. The most expensive film ever made in France. A frenzied mix of chaos, opera, couture, and science fiction. Additionally, it was jeered when it made its Cannes debut. Its detractors called it absurd, foolish, superficial, and excessively loud. But an odd thing occurred. Audiences adored it, particularly the younger ones. If it made sense, it didn't matter to them. They cited Ruby Road. They had an obsession with Lelou's hair. They repeatedly rewound the opera scene with the diva. The fandom became louder each year, but the reviews dwindled. And despite its oddness, The Fifth Element is today a cult masterpiece. The world accepted what the Cannes rejected as a result. 17th. Characters in most films are dressed up. It was the fifth element that adorned the whole galaxy. Conventional sci-fi equipment was not what Luc Besson wanted. He was against recycled space armor and antiseptic clothing. He desired clothing that conveyed a narrative. Jean-Paul Gaultier, a legend, was so called in. The legendary French designer of couture created more than a few noteworthy items. By hand, he constructed more than 1,000 costumes. Every extraterrestrial race has its own rules, shapes, materials, and aesthetic code. The Mondoshawan were old and armored, encased in pyramids like priests. All metal, grime, and mayhem, the Mangalores were snarling mercenaries. People that appeared in a shot for 2 seconds, known as background characters, were also elaborately costumed in unique outfits. The cab drivers were dressed in luminous clothing. Skin-tight neoprene corsets were worn by flight attendants. Security personnel appeared to be extraterrestrial nightclub bouncers. Every stitch was a piece of world-building, not just fashion. Since you only needed to look for the fifth element, no exposition was necessary. And you witnessed a cosmos that was outfitted to murder. 18. In the first scene, the enormous ships were mythical rather than merely science fiction. The Mondoshawan spacecraft were constructed following Egyptian geometry because Luc Besson wanted to incorporate ancient origins with futuristic forms. Rounded tops, substantial bases, and designs derived from sun worship and temple carvings. The notion? That the pyramids may have been built by aliens, or perhaps they were the pyramids themselves. Through the use of silent symbols, the movie connected spiritual legend to sci-fi extravaganza. Because the spaceships themselves were secret in the fifth element. 19th. Though not totally, it appeared to be computer-generated imagery. Neon towers and flying autos in those enormous cityscapes? Initially, they created dozens of tiny models, including hand-built skyscrapers, tiny lanes for traffic, and layered lighting to provide depth. Like in the original Star Wars, they were captured with motion control cameras and then enhanced with computer effects to make them come to life. The blending was flawless, unreal enough to dream about yet real enough to touch. In a movie that was all about texture and mayhem, the future was still constructed by hand. 20. It was directed by a French visionary and produced by French studios. The fifth segment, however, was shot fully in English, not for aesthetic reasons, but rather for survival. Luc Besson was aware that he needed the world to watch his strange, vibrant, and costly film. In order to shoot the entire film at Pinewood Studios in London, he hired British personnel and engaged American actors. At the time, it was the most costly movie France had ever made. It had to speak the language of blockbusters, though, in order to reach a worldwide audience. And it somehow succeeded. An added bonus. It was just intended as a parting line, not a slogan. Lilu repeats it repeatedly, mispronouncing it. Purposeful, yet in broken English. It stuck somehow. It was quoted, imitated, and became a meme before memes were even a thing. Video games such as Borderlands, Cyberpunk 2077, and numerous more now use the term. It's a tribute rather than a plot element. One of the strangest cult favorites in sci-fi is referenced digitally. Even after being uttered 5 times, one word remains memorable. Because a multipass is sometimes all that is required. It was too bright, too loud, too odd, and too French. Unlike critics, supporters knew what to do with the 5th ingredient. Clinging to the turmoil, they committed the lines to memory and fell in love with a film that seemed to have been made on a dare and yet managed to turn out beautifully. At 16, Luc Besson began writing it, but it continued to develop steadily. Conventions, video games, fan tattoos, and fluorescent fever dreams are now some of its enduring forms. The foundation of a sci-fi cult movie is not perfection, but on a mind that wouldn't be quiet. Leave a remark if you're still thinking about this one. Please recommend a crazy, classic movie for us to watch next. For The Fifth Element did not adhere to any of the rules in a world full of them. All it did was light a match and let it burn.